coffee in the morning, does it taste like slavery? Slavery is still prevalent today in the agricultural industry. When you buy your sugar, if it comes from Latin America, it'll have a nice caramel taste with a hint of blood from kidnapped workers. If you buy your beef from Brazil, you are indirectly funding debt bondage. I wasn't always aware of these issues, and when I was, and I found out the treatment that people were put into, I made it my mission to try and buy fair trade whenever I could. So that way people in developing nations can afford basic human rights. So learning about fair trade, you're going to understand why it's important to find out and ask questions about where your food comes from. So first, I will talk about the treatment of workers before fair trade and after fair trade. Then we're going to discuss the drive for low prices, which encourages the slave labor. And then finally, we're going to talk about how fair trade was established and the good that it's doing for developing nations. Because exploitation is really easy when money and jobs are hard to come by. Debt bondage is when employers recruit really, really poor families into plantations. They give them the promise of a job and then don't often tell them that they're going to have to pay for this opportunity, which can be upwards and more of an entire year's salary. If they come from another country, which they often are, their passports are taken off them and then they have to buy them back. This never happens. People stay in these conditions for as long as they live. They are taken to remote areas, as you can see like this. They are under constant guard supervision, under the threat of death and violence. They live in fear. There's no access to human rights. There is no healthcare. They are stripped of their humanity. They become dispensable objects, and if they cannot perform the duty that they are hired to do, they are disposed of. With the families that are lucky enough to not be born into these conditions, there are a few alternatives: plantation or starvation. According to the Food Empowerment Network, these people work for 14 hours a day in the blistering heat with no break for food or for water. Injuries are very, very common. And these people often die from something as small as a cut finger because of infection. The housing that they, if you can even call it that, is deplorable. They are in crowded sheds. They have to sleep on floors, metal cots. There is no access to clean running water. No showers, no drinking water, no toilets. There are thousands of places like this, not just a few, in countries everywhere. People are bleeding for your chocolate bars. According to HelpMe.com, there are over 25 million coffee producers all over the world. And half of these people, their coffee prices are going down consistently. And without agreements like fair trade, it's going to keep happening. Because everybody involved in the production of coffee, from the picking to the small farmers, not the selling of coffee, they are suffering. Because when prices fall, the money doesn't come out of our pockets, doesn't come out of the pockets of the big companies or the managers, it comes out of the pockets of the people picking the coffee beans. So you're probably thinking to yourself, oh, I pay like $6 for a coffee at like Starbucks or something, so obviously it's not my coffee. Yeah, actually it is. So the more people that are involved, there are more people involved in the coffee production process, and the banana process, and all the processes than there have ever been before. And the higher up they are, the deeper their pockets go. According to Thorpe, the governments, and our corporations are keeping the things like this way. The more with tariff and trade restrictions. They also, using their own farmers and their own products, do a thing called product dumping. It's when they flood the market with a product that's below the market price, forcing everybody else out of the market because no one else can afford to stay in. And this isn't just running overseas small farmers who can barely afford to live out of the market, it's also hurting our local farmers as well. Because unless you're aligned with a global conglomerate or a really large corporation, you're part of the problem, you're part of the enemy to them. So this has led to a lot of people asking questions and trying to change things. According to Fair Trade International, who recorded how this all started, it began in 1988 with the first fair trade movement. It was called Max Havelaar, after the Dutch character who was against coffee exploitation. The first country that they went into was Mexico, to have fair trade coffee brought from there to Holland. Since then, there have now been 25 organisations established under 3 producer networks. With one of the companies, Fair Trade International, they have reached over 1.2 million smallholders and workers, and they are making a big difference. Fair trade is changing the system for everybody through importers, exporters, and licensees. The certification is a rigorous process with yearly checkups to make sure everybody is adhering to the processes. They aren't concentrating on big companies overseas. They aren't looking at keeping workers at the end of a large chain. They want to support and assist small farmers so that they can take care of themselves and put more money back into their own local economies. This is done through training, resources, and the mainstream, and giving them access to a mainstream market that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to have. This is a massive development for human rights and for workers' rights. So now that I've given you a bit of an insight into the workers' conditions with and without fair trade, I'm going to talk to you, we talked about the abhorrent and dehumanizing treatment that they had, and how the big companies keep the poor poor, and why we need fair trade and the changes that it brings about. Put your money where your mouth is and buy fair trade. So look for these logos when you're purchasing things. These are reputable companies. And these are some websites that you can go to where you can find out more about fair trade, companies that are aligned with fair trade, and different products that you can.